What's up, everybody? I am Chris Peters. He is Cam Robinson. This is Called Up the Prospects podcast, and we are back with another edition after lighting the internet ablaze with our Matvey Michkov versus Ivan Demidov talk that we didn't even plan to do last week, and suddenly there it is. But lots to talk about today, too. We're actually going to turn the focus back to the NHL. A lot of things happening. Obviously, we got Four Nations coming up, but you've got the Calder race, which has been red hot and really intriguing here. And we've got a lot more to talk about. But before we get to all of that, Cam, how the heck are you? It's a busy time of year, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's always a busy time of year, right? We rest for a couple weeks in July, but the rest is mostly a sprint, and this time of year no different.
Yeah, I mean, like now it just seems like everything is happening, and it's all starting to get geared towards the playoffs, geared towards draft preparations. A lot of midterm rankings out, all these different things. But we wanted to kind of take a step back and talk about the Calder Trophy race. And these are, the guys that are just freshly no longer prospects. They're all called up, if you will. And we are going to take a little look at this because it has been interesting as you look at kind of the rookie stat rankings and different things of what we've seen from the players. And obviously, everybody knows about Lane Hutson, Macklin, Celebrini, Matvey Michkov, and I think Dustin Wolf. I think you could probably say that's the four guys that are most clearly in the mix. You've got Logan Stankoven and kind of the outside looking in, but still very much a factor in this thing. But you look at kind of how players have been utilized, particularly Lane Hutson, leading all rookies in ice time with 22:39 averaged, playing a top four role and a top pairing role practically for Montreal. Macklin Celebrini, a number one center, scoring goals, looking great. He's averaging just under 20 minutes a game. Michkov has seen his ice time dip a little bit more. He's more in that middle six range, and he's been up and down a little bit, but still very much a factor in the rookie scoring race with 34 points, just two behind Celebrini, though he has played in 9 more games. And so there's a lot going on there. And then Dustin Wolf has just been absolutely stellar, impressive. And that's where I want to start, Cam. I want to start with Dustin Wolf because here's a guy that has been doubted throughout his entire career. He has been cast aside because of the size questions. He spent a lot of time in the WHL and the AHL. He's worked his way up. Now he's got a chance to start in the NHL, and he has absolutely delivered for a Calgary team that I think has surprised everybody.
Yeah, I love Dustin Wolf, and I loved him going back to his days in the Western Hockey League there, where he was just putting up monster numbers. We talk about a kid like Jack Ivankovic this year, undersized. But the metrics with Brampton, he's like, he's 898, 901, like he's floating around. When Dustin Wolf was doing this, he was like, oh, let me just post a 935, a 945, like every season. And there we were at the draft, and round after round was going through, and I was banging that table. Somebody draft Dustin Wolf. And so finally Calgary did it. And he was, one of the last handful of picks in the entire draft that year. Rookie goaltenders are not supposed to impact a team the way that he has with the Calgary Flames this year. He has been, they started kind of, alternating starts at the beginning of the season. Well, the crease is his. I think he started something like 13 of the last 18, and 3 or 4 of those that he sat out were tail end of back-to-backs. The 916 save percentage. Goals saved above expected at 5-on-5. I think he just trails Hellebuck and Logan Thompson. Like he's top 3 in the league at above, expected saves. He is clutch. He's calm. He's confident. He has been just a pleasure to watch. And I think you're absolutely right. Like Calgary can thank him for sitting in a playoff spot as we record this right now, sitting in a wild card spot for a team that was expected to be probably more in line to be fighting for like that first overall pick. Now other players have achieved, exceeded expectations this year too, but I think he is the primary reason that they are where they are this season.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. And I think the thing that just always, I remember that draft as well, and hearing the absolute exultation of the entire crew that was with him at that draft. And he was waiting, as you mentioned, he waited a long time, 214th overall in 2019. Oof. And he was part of that 2001 birth year for USA Hockey, which had, Jack Hughes, and it had all Trevor Zegras, Matt Boldy, Spencer Knight. I mean, like all these different players, and he's actually part of that. And And we saw that the Four Nations Cup, all the players that were named to the USA's leadership group were all 97 borns. It was like the 97s and the 01s, and the debate was who was better. And I think when you look at the depth, the 01 class might have it, but really the incredible seasons that he has had overall. This is a guy that until he got to the NHL this year had never had a full season save percentage at any meaningful level below 920. I mean, it's just
insane.
unbelievable. And, it's one of those things. And I think, we kind of get dialed into that size discussion about goalies, and of all the positions, it may be the most important because honestly, it's simple geometry at times where it's the angle of shots, the way things go, the fact that if you are 6'5", you can be on your knees and still cover up a ton of net, and you can do that. And Dustin Wolf is a cerebral assassin in there. He is able to read plays. He is quick. He is on it. And, this is a guy that has a two-time goalie of the year in the AHL, an MVP, in the AHL. And just honestly, really one of those guys that checked every single box in terms of the statistics and the actual doing of the job that, still that we take out the tape measure and we say, hey, that's not actually going to work at the NHL level. Well, now he's proving that it is. And the fact that right now he's got a 915 save percentage, which is funny. It's the only time he's been under 920, but it's the NHL we're talking about here. This is a guy that has done something pretty exceptional. And what the other funny thing about this is Dustin Wolf leaves the Calgary Wranglers, where he was at in the AHL last year. And now they have the best goalie in the league in Devin Cooley in the AHL. So I was like, what is happening? What's going on in Calgary? What do they got in the water over there? And to think, Jacob Markstrom, they were able to move on from him and slide this young guy in, and he has delivered beyond all measures. So it creates this very interesting dynamic. And we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of get into like predictions and projections a little bit later. But, here we are talking about a goaltender in a year where we've got a number one draft pick going off, and we've got, one of the most exciting Russian prospects we've seen in years. And then you've got Lane Hutson doing who knows what in Calgary or in Montreal
Lane Hutson
right
stuff.
Now. And I mean, it's so fun to see these young players get in there, and yet here's Dustin Wolf. But let's talk. We're going to get back to Dustin Wolf, but let's talk about the leaderboard in terms of the stats. And right now, Lane Hutson is leading all rookie scorers as a defenseman, 39 points. 36 of those are assists. He has 23 points at even strength, 16 on the power play, averaging 22 minutes and 39 seconds. So he's had a tremendous year. He's also filling up highlight reels. He's making things look really good. So my question is, with the team, Montreal kind of being in the mix a little bit, I mean, I think it enhances his case, but, how strong is Lane Hutson's case at this point to be, the Calder? Is he the Calder favorite? I mean, there's obviously a lot of debate, but where does he fall for you right now, Cam?
I think he's because I do really like Dustin Wolf a lot. And I think that he's being overshadowed a little bit just because of some of the flashy plays that Hutson's doing. And, Macklin Celebrini has the name brand attached to him, first overall pick, 18 years old. But, I think we're talking about our top three right now. And It's nearly February. And honestly, I do believe that it could end up in any order at the end of the season. That I think this back, 35 games will really dictate who gets it. I do have a little theory that we'll get into in the next segment. But I think Hutson's obviously leading the charge offensively, total points, and he's playing so many minutes, and he has such a great opportunity. The opportunities are there for him to put up all those points and to set highlight reels on fire with his skill set. That's going to help, right? That's going to get him more eyes from different media members throughout the country, that they're going to see those highlights and they're going to be like, my goodness, this kid. But maybe they don't have to see some of the defensive miscues or that a rookie defender is naturally going to have. It doesn't matter that it's Lane Hutson. It's going to be all rookie defenders are going to run into those issues. So I do think he's right there. If he's not the front runner, he's very much within striking distance. And yeah, I do think we're looking at the top three right there, though.
Yeah. And it's interesting, and because obviously I think at one point we would have been saying Michkov is for sure in the mix, and it's starting to get to the point where it's just the role is changing for him. And you look at Celebrini's role, and you look at Hutson's role, and you look at Wolf's role, and they're all in prominent lineup positions for their respective teams. And so, before we get too much further, away from that and Celebrini, to me, the one thing you've got now with Celebrini is he did have the injury, but he missed, not enough games to knock him out of the discussion. He's leading all rookies in points per game at 0.88. As I mentioned, he's 1936 in terms of his time on ice, which is putting him second among all rookies, only to Hutson in terms of average ice time. 138 shots on goal. He has 16 goals to lead all rookies in that category as well, and 36 points. It's one of those things, and we are going to talk about a little bit more about your theories about Calder voting next. But it's so, I think when you come in with the hype that Celebrini did, and it wasn't Bedard level hype, but it was pretty good. I think that all of a sudden you're saying, okay, how do you contend with that if you're everybody else? And we'll talk about it more. But I mean, really, I still think the argument is strong that on merit, he might be the most talented of the entire group, and probably historically over the course of his career going to be the most impactful. So how do you, and that's not how you weigh the award, but I mean, just, we've watched Macklin for a couple of years now do what he's done, and I'm not surprised that he's been this good. I'm sure you're not either, but is he Calder? Is he the Calder winner good for you?
Oh yeah, he's the Calder winner good for sure. I am, big proponent of Macklin Celebrini. I am very impressed with how he's translated though, right out the door.
Yeah.
Being 18 years old in the NHL, we've seen numerous examples of first overall picks at 18 years old stepping into the league and struggling, right? Jack Hughes recently, going back, I remember, everyone points at Joe Thornton, and it takes a while for some of these guys to really figure it out. And so the list of 18-year-olds to ever win the Calder, and this is a trophy that's been handed out for nearly 100 years now, is 5 players long. Okay, so it's Connor Bedard, it's Nate McKinnon, it's Tom Barrasso, a goaltender, right? Like, how impressive is that? Dale Hawerchuk and Bobby Orr. So if Mac does take home the Calder, and if I'm putting money down on it right now, that's who I'm betting on. And there's a reason that, the betting sites also have him as the favorite. They know what they're doing. They're not looking to give their money away. I think he is the odds-on favorite at this point to take that award home, and he'd be just the 6th 18-year-old to ever do it. And I think that is wildly, wildly impressive, and really speaks to just how developed his entire game is, right? He's not reliant on just offensive numbers and starting 70% of his starts in the offensive zone and really being force-fed power play opportunities and being surrounded by like elite level talent that he just gets to kind of leech off of. No, he's a play driver. He's starting 47% of his starts are in the offensive zone. So he's having to come through the neutral zone or through the defensive end to get there, and he has to drive play up there. Yes, he is getting top line minutes. Yes, he is getting top power play minutes, but of course he is. But he doesn't have that surrounding talent around him. Like Michael Granlund leads the team in points. Good player, not a superstar. So I think, and then defensively too, right? Just see the effort level, the physicality, his brain away from the puck. It's all there for him to be like a true star franchise center, and we're getting a look at that right now too. So it's been very, very impressive.
Yeah, you know what? You bring up a great point about the talent surrounding these players, and really when you talk about each of them, I'd say Montreal have some guys that are stars, not superstars. You've got Calgary, which is overachieving based on every single expectation that was put in front of them coming into this season. You've got the Sharks, which we knew were going to be a struggle. And really even, if you throw Mitchkov into the mix, Philly, again, it's a team kind of in flux, probably a little bit better insulated there than some of these other guys are in terms of the veteran presence that's there. But I mean, you just look at that and you say, wow, these guys are doing it. And all the excuses that we can make for them, we don't have to make for them. That's kind of one of the crazy parts about it, is that, and the other point that I wanted to touch on again is Macklin Celebrini's overall development and where he is right now. And you think about, here's a guy that went from Shattuck St. Mary's right into the USHL at 16 years old, dominant player, right into college the following year at 17 years old, dominant player, right into the NHL at 18 years old. And while he's not dominant, he's exceptional. I mean, he is a stud and an absolute star on the rise here. And you look at the shot, NHL ready shot, NHL ready reads, NHL ready compete. The fact that he's worked on his physical strength over the last 3 years and really got to a point where it was never a concern, but now he's at a point where he can actually exert himself and also kind of force the issue at the NHL level against top players. And that's something a lot of guys at his level cannot do. So I'm just fascinated by that as well. Those guys, that cluster of those players are there. But I did want to talk briefly about Matvei Michkov as well. We've kind of got the three in there, but now Michkov and as I mentioned, I think part of it is the role is changing. I don't think that John Tortorella is doing anything untoward in terms of his ice time and how he's using him. I actually think it's been relatively fair. And I think that there are things that Michkov absolutely does need to work on at the NHL level. But he's one of those guys where I'm not going to rule him out yet because we have seen him turn that dial up in terms of his offensive capability. We haven't seen it at the NHL level. But if there's, we'll see kind of where things go and what Philly looks like at the end of the year. But he's one of those guys that I feel like he could get hot and really just get going here. So, any other lingering thoughts from you about Michkov and just kind of his role in this rookie class as we go forward here?
Do I just lean into Philly hating me after last week by picking Demidov? Do I just maybe we only clip what I say next? And I'm just you know what? I don't even think Matvei Michkov is a threat for the Calder this year. I think it's the big three and he's outside of the look. And you know what? I'm joking, but I am kind of serious. Is that I do, like I said a minute ago, is I do think we have our top three at this point, barring injury or something unsuspected. But you're absolutely right, is that this kid is so talented that he can get himself on a bit of a heater. When shooters get hot, the goals just start flowing too. So all Michkov needs to do is, grab a couple in one game, grab one the next game, and all of a sudden he's feeling it. And he could rattle off 8, 9, 10 goals in a 10-game span. And now we've got ourselves, a big question is because you pay for goals too, right? And so if he can get cooking, but it's almost like they have a plan for him long term, which I hope they do. And that plan doesn't involve winning the Calder Trophy. It's about developing him. It's about teaching him how to play the game the right way in all three zones, which I think is important so that he can become a well-rounded player enough that he can eat up 20 minutes a night and he can be out there in all situations and he won't have his coaches pulling their hair out. But at the same time, you don't put a harness on a thoroughbred, on a stallion. You let him run wild a little bit too. So I think that they have to find a balance with him. He's a young player yet. I think when he's in his prime, those shackles will be off, and they'll be like, yeah, you know what, Michkov, he scores more than he gets scored on, and we're gonna take that because he's never going to be a Selke level player. But I do think that you're right that he has the capability, maybe not the opportunity or the surrounding talent, to really push and make a late charge down the back half to win this thing. But he does have the skill. He does have the skill to do that. So I won't write him out completely, but I think at this time we're looking at probably the number 4 in this Calder race.
Yeah, and I think that's where I would have him as well. And it's not, I think as the minutes change, we'll see. He's averaging over 16 minutes a game, still very strong for a rookie, especially a guy that we didn't anticipate seeing in the league for a couple more years. Yet here he is. He is second in power play points among rookies with 14. 20 of his points come at even strength. Lane Hutson is the leader in the power play points department with 16. But the other thing too that I find rather curious is Michkov's low shooting totals compared to, say, Macklin, Celebrini, and Logan Stankoven. He's behind both of them. He has over 100 shots on goal. But I think this is a player that thrives on volume and getting, but also smart shots. He's not the kind of guy. He's not really a volume shooter. I shouldn't put it that way. But obviously, the more opportunities, the more looks he's gonna get, the more the puck's gonna go in the net because he has such an elite shot and an elite brain for scoring. And I'll be interested to see where that goes from here.
I think shot volume is it's important though to note with some of these players, especially these young players,
Yes.
Is that, opportunities is that, Celebrini's put 3.5 a game. Like that just speaks to how he is getting to space with the puck. How he's understanding space so he can receive the puck and get shots on net. When players are struggling to get that volume up, even if they're not necessarily, Ovechkin and try to fire 5 shots on goal per game, is that it just speaks to their understanding and how they're keeping up at the pace of play and everything like that too. So I would like Mishkov to be shooting a whole heck of a lot more than 2.1 that he's doing now, pushing into that 3 range, maintain your conversion rate in the 10, 12, 13, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, he's a 40 goal scorer, versus having to fight uphill and click at like 18, 19% when you're only putting 2 shots on goal per game, right? It's that makes a big difference if you can add that shot and a half, which is what Celebrini has been doing.
Yeah, I think that all good points there, and really, really fascinated to see kind of where things shake out as the season progresses. We're going to go into the Four Nations break here in a little bit. Guys will have a chance to recharge. We'll see how guys come out of that. I think it's going to be interesting to watch how these teams kind of shape up as trades happen, as players come in and out, and what happens there. But I did want to talk about a couple other rookies that aren't necessarily in the Calder conversation. But one of them, I think last year, he's a player that I know you and I both really like a lot, and have liked a lot from the beginning. And that's Logan Stankoven, who's currently 4th in rookie scoring with 24 points for the Dallas Stars. He was the rookie of the year in the AHL last season. I thought that he proved his value beyond measure in terms of how he played in the playoffs last season. At the end of last season with Dallas, he showed that he could hang. But I mean, he's also, I mentioned he's right behind Macklin Celebrini in terms of shot volume, 130 shots on goal for Logan Stankoven. I think the goals are going to come with that. He only has 6 goals so far this season. And he's a guy that has typically scored wherever he's been. But I mean, he seems to be ahead of schedule, I feel like, in terms of players that kind of were drafted in his range, that even had the pedigree that he did coming out of junior. He's really made the transition pretty seamlessly, hasn't he?
He has, and it was very seamless to start the year, right? Like I think you rattled off like 14 through the first 15 games, and now he's, that's cooled off significantly. He has 2 goals, 9 points in his last 26. Like that's the bump in the road for the rookie, right? Like I know he got the looks last year and in the postseason and stuff, but now he's fighting it a little bit. The minutes are still there. He's still getting his opportunities. Secondary offensive opportunities, I should say, because he's playing on such a good team, right? And that's the difference between, like, you put him on San Jose and he's probably eating 20 minutes a night. And he's on the first line, he's on the first power play, and that's the difference when you're coming in and you're a mid-second rounder versus a first overall pick. But no, we agree on Logan Stankoven. He's a beauty. I don't think he's actually in this race, to be honest with you. I think that he's going to be, he's going to probably end up hovering in that 45, 50 point zone, and that'll get him a 4th, 5th, or 6th place finish in this. But long term, has point of game upside, I think. Like I really do. And I think that he's going to be he's such a competitor that he has the goods to get up to that kind of level, that 75, 80 point level.
Yeah, that's exactly why I think he's got future star written all over him, and then just another tremendous piece of draft value from the Dallas Stars, which seems to be a fairly regular occurrence in their current setup, and you have to give them a ton of credit for that. Just wanted to also briefly touch on a couple of former Boston College teammates now in the Pacific Division together. Will Smith's heating up. Will Smith, kind of the forgotten man amid Celebrini. He and Macklin have become social media superstars. However, it looks like they got the TikTok game going, the Instagram game going. They are definitely the I guess just the dynamic duo of San Jose sports. So that's great to see. But Will Smith has been lighting it up a little bit more, and I have to have a little bit of a mea culpa at the beginning of this season when things weren't going well for him and he looked a little lost out there. I was like, I don't know, man. Maybe they got to send him down. Maybe they got to, kind of figure things out, allow him to reset. But I think, and I remember there were Sharks fans that argued with me at the time and were correct in doing so. And that, hey, let's give him some time to adjust before we really make an opinion on it. And, the thing is we're not talking about Calder contender at this point. We're not talking about a guy that is going to, knock off Celebrini anytime soon. But what he is showing is that he's adapting to the NHL game. He's finding the space that wasn't available to him earlier in the season. He's making good reads. He still has that tremendous vision. We knew the physical strength was going to be an issue. It still is. It's going to be something he's going to have to continue to work on, but all players his age often do. But Cam, I over the last week or so, or a couple of weeks here, I'm starting to see the glimpses of the Will Smith that we've seen over the last couple of years. A guy that is highly productive. I mean, he has been on a bit of a roll here. I think he has points in 5 straight games so far. Of late, he's getting more minutes as a result. And so, I think my way too early panic, and maybe we had this conversation last week about patience, was not warranted. And it seems like he's starting to put it together slowly but surely. Are you seeing the same, or do you disagree?
No, I agree. And San Jose has come after me a few times because I've never been as high on Will Smith as many in the industry. I kept waiting for him to run into a roadblock because of the way he plays the game doesn't scream translatable to the NHL, and it didn't going back 2, 3, 4 years. But he just keeps translating pretty well up the ladder. And so, he did have some difficulties there, but I think the move up to the right wing on that top line, getting him out of the middle and giving him some more freedom to work with has been really nice for him. And you can see he's got a little more creativity. He's got a little more free flow to his game. And he's a super creative player too, right? And he's got excellent handles and he's got really strong vision. So yes, not a contender for the Calder. Number one is that he's going to be second fiddle to Macklin Celebrini on his team. And they, even if he does get hot, it'll probably be, given a little bit of that credit to Celebrini. It's like, all eyes are on this first year player instead of this first year player. So, but I think it's been excellent for him individually. It'll be good for the team. And it's great for, the fans of that team as well, as that they have these two young players that could grow up and be stars. And like you said, like that they just seem like they're buddies, which is great, right? You need that harmony in the dressing room. You want those young players to be hanging out and having fun outside of the rink and hanging out in the summer and going. You don't want a Vancouver situation here. You want to keep everything nice and rosy and happy. And so, yeah, I like what Will Smith is doing right now. And like he said, what has he got, like 5 points in his last 4 games or 6 and 5 or something like that. So great little run for him. Hopefully they can keep it rolling there too, right? And keep him up on the wing. I'd just keep him there for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I guess they left the Battle of Comav back in Boston. They just said, nope, that's not coming with us. We're gonna be boys here. So, and I also think there's something to the fact that Macklin's spotlight, the spotlight being on Macklin, I think allows Will a very unusual position of basically having very little pressure on him to be the guy. Like we've seen so many guys come in and there's the expectation. I mean, Bedard was so heavy. People were expecting him to turn the Hawks around in a minute. And it, obviously it takes a lot more than that, especially when, you can't lean on a teenager that hard. Although Celebrini's starting to make it look like it's possible. The last guy I wanted to kind of touch on in this group, and there's been a lot of pleasant surprises too, guys like Jackson Blake. And, I think Siplikov in New York has been really intriguing as well. Emil Heineman has come out and had a good season. Unfortunately had, the incident recently. But the last guy I want to talk about is a guy who came in with a lot of fanfare, a lot of controversy, and that's Cutter Gauthier. He's played Philly twice. He's had the Boo Birds out. He's dealt with the hostilities and everything else. But he's another player where slowly but surely he's starting to find his way. He's played in 50 games this year, 21 points, averaging 14.25 a game. I think that this is another guy where patience is going to be required. I think that he's still a work in progress. He was a work in progress when he was drafted. I think a lot of people going back to that time are like, hey, this is a bit of a risky play because, there were definitely kind of some thoughts about hockey sense and other things like that. I think those are still there, but he is a horse. I mean, he's strong. He can shoot. He can do all those different things. He tracks like, a potential scoring winger, top line scoring winger. And I still think that's true. But, 21 points in 50 games, not exactly, lighting the world on fire, but certainly taking a step in the right direction. I mean, anything from Gauthier's game this year that you like, anything you don't like, anything that you kind of have a takeaway, because obviously, he's 5th in rookie scoring right now, which isn't a necessarily high bar. We've only got 6 guys over 20 points this season in the rookie class. But just any lingering thoughts on Cutter Gauthier, who obviously came in with fanfare and controversy?
Yeah, I think that it's been up and down for him. I think it's keep him on the wing too. And I think long term Anaheim has that easy decision in front of them because they have so many centers. Is that he doesn't
Yep.
he doesn't strike me as someone who's really going to develop into a center long term either. But the one thing I will say is that it seems like him and Mason McTavish are forging some nice chemistry, which is going to be really key for the Ducks long term. So the points haven't really started rolling for Cutter, but McTavish has been cooking, right? And they need Mason McTavish to get rolling. And so that's really big for the organization. And I think that if they can have those two linking up and being kind of a duo, a partnership long term, lots of coaches and lots of organizations like to run pairs, and then you can rotate in your third guy. And so if that becomes a pair right now, it's Robbie Fabry. So they got the veteran presence on the other side. And it seems to be clicking. It seems to certainly be working for McTavish. So if that can be something long-term, and as Gauthier develops and matures, that could be a really, really exciting, duo in the top six for the Ducks here. Potentially even their first line duo too long-term. So Gauthier, like you said, patience is needed. I'm not as super high on his pure offensive upside, but I do think he's going to be a strong player for the Ducks on the wing.
Yeah, I would say the wing is a safe bet. I've been real light on his potential to be a center over the years. I just think that his scoring tool is more effective when he's not a driver and more of a finisher, which is fine. But yeah. So and again, you're not looking, a guy not winning the Calder doesn't really mean much about their overall career. It's hard. It's a hard trophy to win, and this year it's particularly hard. And I think that we've got a really exciting rookie class, and there's a lot of teams that should feel excited about the future of their teams with the way that the youth have played. But we're going to keep this rookie talk going because we want to leave a little bit of meat on the bone here to get into our Beyond Belief segment. We're jumping right into it here in segment 2 because Beyond Belief has been it's been a winner among our listeners. I keep hearing a lot of replies about how they like this format. However, last week I was talking about how I didn't know, like, is it fact or is it beyond belief? Is it like,
right.
and I had a listener reach out. Tommy reached out and he's like, why don't you just say believable or beyond belief? I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So
that's believable.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't think of that, but Tommy, thank you for the suggestion. I'm using it. So we're going to keep the rookie talk going. And Cam, I'm going to kick it off to you. And I'm going to say it this way. Dustin Wolf will be the first goaltender to win the Calder since Steve Mason in 2009. Believable?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no, but I don't like it. I would love Dustin Wolf to take this home and to be one of a handful of goaltenders to ever win the award. I would, but, and as we're going to get into in a hot second here, I think this is Macklin Celebrini's trophy. And I think that the NHL and the marketing of it and his age and his pedigree and everything about him and, sexy California market, I think it's Celebrini's to lose. And Wolf would have to really, really run the table, put up, he'd have to get to 30 plus wins and have just a demonstratively high save percentage to do it. It's not impossible, but I'm going to say, unfortunately, it's beyond belief.
What makes it somewhat believable to me is the possibility that, you get Calgary into the playoffs and he's a big part of it. If Calgary gets into the playoffs, it's a different dynamic because we're talking about a player that significantly positively impacted a playoff team, whereas Sharks aren't making the playoffs. The Habs could potentially make the playoffs. It's not, it's bunched up there in the East, so it's possible. But you look at kind of these things, and that's why it's at least somewhat believable. I'm not saying that he's going to do it because I'm with you. I think that Celebrini it's kind of in the bag as long as he keeps going. But to me, the thing is that it's fascinating to have that ability to have this discussion about a goalie, and not only a goalie, but a guy that has had to prove himself so many different steps of his career and had to wait and wait and wait. And the fact that he's very likely going to be in the top 3 of this Calder finalist class is pretty darn impressive. So, no matter whether he wins or he doesn't, and the fact that we haven't had a goalie win it since 2009 is kind of crazy when you think about it. I think this is going to be really fascinating. So, yeah, but let's talk about the big dog. Let's get into the
Okay.
next one and keep it rolling here, my friend.
Okay, I got this one for you here. Macklin Celebrini will have to lose the Calder Trophy rather than having to win it at this point of the season.
Yeah, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I think you're absolutely right that yes, that is 100% the case. I think he walked into this season the favorite. I think that he was certainly, his age was against him, I guess, in the eyes of some, but really, you and I have seen him. We know what he is. We know what he can be. So I think it's really his to lose. The goal scoring is there even better than I think that I anticipated. You're never quite sure how the shot or how he does it translates, and he is beating goalies clean an awful lot this year. He's got that incredible one-timer, which we knew would come across. But his ability to get to the interior, his ability to play inside, I mean, he's really the total package. And I think, I'll let you to kind of explain some of maybe the voter obstacles to going against him at this point. But I mean, the thing is, nobody's stretching, I don't think, to have him as the number one guy.
No, like I said, and I don't think that I wouldn't have said this in October, that it's just his to lose. But what he's accomplished so far, a first overall pick in California, it behooves the NHL to lift up these type of players, to market these type of players, to get them in commercials, to have some trophies and some hardware on their shelves early. It helps them out. Not to say that the voters are necessarily going to look at that too, but they are going to look at him being still 18 by the time the season ends. So that alone, like, it's not supposed to come into play, but it does. It has to, right? When you look at where some of these other players were when they were 18, right? They're still playing junior hockey. They're not near the NHL level. They wouldn't be cracking any rosters, let alone putting up 30 plus goals or 70 plus points. So that has to come into effect. Even you can look at, like, you can talk about Eastern Western bias, is that, a lot of people on the West Coast always blame, it's like, oh, these guys aren't staying up late at night to watch these players. People are seeing Macklin Celebrini. They're seeing, if they're not staying up, they're watching the highlights, they're watching the condensed games the next day. They know what this player is and how important he is to the game. And so I fully believe that he has to lose this trophy at this point rather than win it. And that's just part of the gig. Name brand carries you a long way, which is why it's going to be so darn difficult. And I think Lane Hutson has a name brand attached to him too. And that helps, is that, some of the things he's done coming up and some of the points that he's produced and the club that he plays for, obviously a historic franchise in Montreal, and all the eyes on there too. But like a player like Dustin Wolf is just such an uphill battle to try to take over those two guys. So I do think that this is his to lose at this point.
Yeah. That's pretty. I also love that argument about, the West Coast and in the age of social media, the internet, if you are missing what Macklin Celebrini is doing, that's a you problem, everybody.
That's a you problem.
And I think having voted on awards before in the PHWA, and certainly, I think you can kind of sense where winds are blowing as votes kind of come in. I just think that guys like Celebrini are unavoidable at this point, and he's made it so. But now I'm going to
do something here?
Go ahead.
Hold on.
Yeah,
Can I do something? Because we had so much fun last week with just a completely unprepared question. Why not do it again? So, completely unprepared question for you here, Chris Peters of FloHockey. You're starting a franchise right now, and you have an opportunity to select Macklin Celebrini or Connor Bedard. Who are you taking? Based on what we've seen now through their early NHL careers, you have that information in the bag. Who are you taking?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that one when we talked about this a little bit before. I feel like it's only solidified, and it's Mac. It's Mac, and the reason it's Mac is because of that completeness of his game. We talked actually last time we had this discussion. We were talking about, Jay Pandolfo was saying Macklin Celebrini was kind of Crosby light, and I was like, he's pretty close to Crosby. Like, and the thing is like, as we watch him in the NHL and as we watch, and Crosby was like, I believe was his favorite player growing up. You know, as we've seen him mature, it's like, I haven't seen so I didn't cover Sidney Crosby as a draft prospect. All right. It was a little bit young at that point. I was in college. So not that young, but still young enough. Anyway, I remember when I was young. But the I didn't see that. So I don't have a reference point for that. However, I see what Sidney Crosby became in the NHL. I've followed his career, and it was never just about points. It was just the completeness of his game. And to me, I said this last year when we were doing the draft coverage, I haven't personally covered a player for the draft at that age. Not some guy, late birth dates might be there, but he was a true 17-year-old draft eligible. I had never seen anybody that was as complete since I've been doing this personally. And I think that's only been enhanced. That's not to say that Connor Bedard isn't going to be a superstar, is probably going to outproduce Macklin Celebrini, is going to probably score more goals than he does. And maybe we're going to have some of these debates over the course of time. But to me, I look at the completeness of a Macklin Celebrini and I say, that's a guy that's going to help me win a Stanley Cup because he does everything. And I look at him now and his ability to do that at 18 years old. What's he going to be when he's in his prime? He's just getting started and he's already there. So that's for me. And I think I know where you're going with this one too.
Well, I have to, right? Is that I agree with all those things. I do. I brought it up. I have to agree with the things you just said, but I have to play devil's advocate. And I think that the world has kind of fallen asleep on Connor Bedard a little bit just because of the situation that he has been in.
That's
not
fair.
To say that you are discounting him in any regard here. You recognize the situation he's in, but this is still, in my mind, a generational offensive player. And knowing a little bit about Connor Bedard, like, we know Sidney Crosby is like the ultimate competitor, right? He's the greatest grinder of all time, the most talented grinder ever, because he has Hall of Fame skill in a grinder's body and work ethic. And I think that Connor Bedard has a similar mindset. He is singularly focused on becoming the best hockey player he can be. And I think that is going to translate as he matures physically and he gets more support around him, that he's going to be able to add that competitive fire to his play away from the puck in the defensive end. He won't be as big and as strong as Celebrini is, but I do think that on a pure skill basis, it's enough that gap is big enough that, let's say, I don't think it's outrageous to think that Bedard, in the right situation, in the peak of his career, could push for 60 goals. And if he's pushing for 60 goals, he's probably pushing for 125 points too. And I don't think Celebrini has anywhere near that level of upside. And so I'm still taking Connor Bedard, even though it hurts my soul to say that, because I do love Macklin Celebrini.
And I would say that the hockey world at large has reacted a bit too harshly to Connor Bedard's current season. He's still producing at a pretty high level right now, and the age gap between him and Macklin Celebrini is not super wide. It's the year, whatever it is. Comparing the two of them together, it's going to be interesting. But let's get back to this one though, so we can maybe create more fire in Montreal. Because I like you stoked the flames of Philadelphia. I have drawn the ire of our friends in the Bell Province. So anyway, Mr. Robinson here. Lane Hutson would be a top 4 defenseman on most teams right now. On most NHL teams.
So that would be more than half? Would be most?
More than half of the NHL teams.
More than half? Yes. I think on more than half the NHL teams, he would be a top 4 defenseman. And I think that there are a good number of teams that he wouldn't necessarily be. Some of these teams that have really deep blue lines or have quite clearly players that do the things that he does well, like he's not going to unseat Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes or Roman Josi and those type of players on the blue line. He's not going to be able to take that role from them. And as such, he's going to have to be demoted down into a secondary offensive role. And if you already have a really strong secondary guy in that market, maybe like a Devon Taves or something like that, then, there are going to be teams. But I do think just with his pure level of creativity, the things that he can do on the ice, it's not quite at that level. It might get there where Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar or something like that. He's not at that level yet, but he has that type of ability to impact the game, especially when it's opened up on the man advantage, or if you surround him with some good talent. So I'll say yes, that he on most teams. So that all it has to be a 17 or above. I'll say yes. How about you? Burn Montreal to the ground too, Chris. Come on.
Yeah, well, I think it's always tough because the threshold of being a top 4 defenseman in the NHL is so large, and that there's such an incredible, just, the playing upwards of 18 to 20 minutes. Now he's at 22 minutes. So he is a top 4 defenseman right now. He's a top pairing defenseman, basically, based on numbers. When you look at him versus the rest of the league, I think he's in the 40s in terms of average time on ice per game for NHL regulars. So pretty good. That obviously puts him firmly in the mix to be a top 4. The one thing the reason that I'll say it's beyond belief for most teams in the NHL is because I still think that and this isn't my opinion necessarily, it's because of the fact that there is still that inherent bias, and there are absolutely teams that believe you cannot win in the most important times of the season with a defenseman at his size. Now, he's listed at 5'9". He's one of the lightest defensemen in the league at just over 160 pounds. He has put in a ton of work on his body. He has tried to get as strong as he possibly can. And what we've seen this year is that what his game translates. The question that I have is, will other teams ever get beyond the fact that he's 5'9"? And the good news for him is that he doesn't have to, because he's got a coach in Marty St. Louis who has given him every opportunity to do these things. And maybe Marty is going to be the one that comes out right. And he's like, hey, you shouldn't do that. Now, there aren't a lot of guys that have the skill level of Lane Hutson. The question is he really the outlier? Is he the exception to the rule that some of these NHL teams have had? And there will be many that will never come to the side of, yes, he is. But and believe me, I have been a Lane Hutson guy from day one. I have believed that because he competes, because he has tremendous hockey intelligence, because of his skating, because of his elite hands, that he is going to be a special player. And he is delivering on that right now. He did it in college last year and the year before. He's doing it now this year. But the question is, most NHL teams, and I still think the majority of NHL teams, believe that you need a bigger blue line, especially in your top 4, in order to compete in the most difficult times of the season. Cale Makar is 5'11", Quinn Hughes is 5'10", 5'11". That's kind of the limit where they say that's it. And so, we'll see. The point has been made too about, the Stanley Cup and Lane Hutson and defensemen of that size. There just haven't been a lot of teams that have had a guy in their top 4 at his size that won the Stanley Cup. Doesn't mean that Lane can't be that first guy. But I'm just saying, when it comes to the majority of NHL teams, even seeing what we're seeing right now, they still are going to say to them, it's beyond belief. But, I think to the two of us, I feel like we see the potential there for him, if teams were willing to open their eyes to it. And that's really the only question, I think.
So Cole's notes is that Chris thinks Ivan Demidov is a bust and Lane Hutson is a bottom pairing defenseman. I just want to make sure that we got the radio clip right there. Yeah.
Oh man, I should have said top pairing to just maybe give myself a little bit of grace there.
A little
but
buffer.
I said top
that would have been good. Yeah. Bottom pair guy. Yeah.
All right. One more. One more for the road. Yeah.
There is still a dark horse out there that could disrupt this whole Calder race. There's somebody out there, maybe we've talked about him already, maybe we haven't. There's somebody hanging outside on the fringes that could come in and really shake this Calder race up. What do you think?
I think to shake it up, yes, potentially. I don't think there's anybody that's going to unseat the guys that we have talked about so far. I haven't bought into that yet. So I'm going to say that it's beyond belief that we're going to have a dark horse. But I will give you one name that I'm keeping an eye
Give it
on,
to
and
me.
it's really because of the last couple of weeks I've seen the shift and the click and the here it comes, and it is Will Smith. Now, there's a 0% chance that Will Smith is going to win the Calder Trophy, especially because his teammate is one of the best rookies there is. But I think there's the possibility that he's going to get hot and stay hot, and he's been hot right now. So I've got Will Smith as a dark horse to be disruptive, to maybe get into the finalist or the top 5, but I don't think that he'll ultimately be able to do enough to disrupt the top of the class. So I'm going to say, that it's beyond belief, but I have one name just to keep an eye on.
Okay, I'm gonna give one name too then, and it's Jackson Blake. And
Ooh,
normally when we're looking at rookies, right, we're looking statistical, right? We're looking at offense because that is usually the easiest thing for them to translate up. But he has been so strong defensively. He has jumped over so many players in that organization already. And we're 3 years removed from him being a 4th-round pick? The surplus value that he's already provided is immense. And now, all of a sudden, he finds himself on a line with Sebastian Aho and Mikko Rantanen. And, he's, I think 3 of the last 4 games, he's played almost 18 minutes. He's got 3 points in his last 3 games. I think that there is a world, not to say he's going to come in and knock anybody out of the top of this race, but that he could come in, make enough noise to maybe get people thinking about putting him up there in that top 3 if, he stays in that deployment and the points start flowing. Because put me out there with those 2 guys, and I could probably jack up 20 or 30 points down the stretch here too, right? I'll just go to the net, just bang it off me. So I think a player like Jackson Blake, and to the voters might not recognize the defensive stuff that he's been doing, but the Hurricane staff sure have. They recognize just how impressive he has been away from the puck in the defensive end, and now they're rewarding him by putting him in that spot next to Aho and Rantanen. And I think that really speaks volumes because they got some good players that they could put in that spot instead of him. And so for him to have that, and if he can hold on to that down the stretch, and who knows, maybe he could put up 20 points or something like that during that back little kick too. And I think that he could disrupt things because things that happen are fresh on memories of people. So if you have a really killer finish, it's going to be worth a lot more than, say, Logan Stankoven's 14 points through the first 15 games, right? Because it seems like a year ago now already, and we're only halfway through the season.
Yeah, and that's a great call too. Jackson Blake in 3 of his last 4 games, he's played close to 18 minutes. So he's starting to get in the way that Mitchkov's ice time has kind of dwindled. Blake's is going up, and now you're putting him in a situation. He's an incredibly quick skater. He's a guy that is kind of in that Jake Gensel mode of underappreciated out of the USHL, undersized guy, goes to college, Hobie finalist, does a lot of really, it's incredible to watch what he's done. And I think you bring up a great point too about the play away from the puck. And those were the things that I was like, gosh, is it going to translate? We saw last year, he's really grown over the years, and he's gotten stronger, and he's gotten quicker, and he's gotten better. And so I like that pick. I think that's a really interesting one, and especially because the role and the situation that he's going to be in is potentially growing here into a point where, hey, that's a real interesting guy. He is 3rd among all rookies in goals with 11 so far this season. So, he's not that far out of the race when you look at it that way. And if he continues playing the amount that he's playing, things are going to start going well for him. So I think it's pretty good. But yeah, so that's a good call. I like that one, partner. So
Thank you.
That's going to do it for Beyond Belief, but we're not done yet. We are talking a little bit more. We're going to keep it NHL centric here for just a bit, because I think one thing that really does impact the prospect world is the trade deadline. And it's a little bit later this year because of the 4 nations. There's a lot of moving parts. We saw the big blockbuster with Mikko Rantanen that we just talked about, and how that's going to impact things for the Carolina Hurricanes. But there's a lot more out there, and there's a lot of different rumors and different things, sometimes involving prospects. So we wanted to take a few minutes, and not a ton of time, but just a few minutes to talk about kind of the landscape. And Cam, since you're in Vancouver and you're plugged in Vancouver, and certainly I've seen some of your spots with Sekeres and Price and all the different things that you do out there. stirring the pot as you're wont to do. What's going on in Canucks world, and really what do you think the outcome is ultimately going to be here?
I'm going to give Matt Sakaris love for that. I'm going to start calling him Sekaris. That's what I'm going to do. So
sorry, Matt. It's just it's like a
no,
force
I'm
of
going to
habit.
call him,
You read it one way and then you say
right?
it out loud.
Of
Yeah,
course,
I know.
of course. Oh yeah, yeah.
Sakaris.
Hyperbole. So Sakaris, yes. So Vancouver, it's a mess, to be honest with you, right? Like JR, they're like Jim Rutherford, their president, came out and just said all the quiet parts out loud, that the rift is very much real. It's been there for years. They hope that they could get over it. They've had these meetings, they've sat them down, it goes away from it, it festers, it comes back up. Everyone's kind of being like, why would you say that and now diminish the potential return on these players? This isn't a secret. Everybody in the NHL knew this, right? The media, like myself and some of these other people, we've been hearing it. Teams know it. It's nothing new. Now the fans can just stop saying that it's media driven. But as far as how I think this is going to play out, number one, the team first and foremost would prefer to trade JT Miller. He hasn't officially asked for a trade out, but as far as I'm concerned, and what I've been told is that he is ready to go and he's willing to waive his no movement clause and get a fresh start and get out of Vancouver. The issue is, no one's offering what his value is. And this is a guy who had 103 points last year. He's on USA for the Four Nations. He's at his best is an elite, heavy, unique player who shows up in the playoffs and has, goal scoring, and he has playmaking, he has a physicality, and he can kill penalties. He plays on your top power play. He's supposed to be a leader. He's got an A on his jersey too. And so you can't just give that guy away. But at the same time, the offers, they know that the issues, and they're when GMs are drowning, they throw anvils, not life preservers. And so teams are throwing anvils at them. And so to just give up on that asset and recoup like a third round or a third line center and maybe a middle prospect or something, I don't know, or a late first, just isn't good enough for management at this point anyways. But nearly the entire league still values Elias Pettersson at the rate that he is for his career, even though it's been nearly 12 months since he's really been, producing at a superstar level. 2 years ago, I had 102 points or whatever. Last year had his 90 points. Now this year he's on pace for like 60. And that's, I'm sure a big part of that is what's been going on in the dressing room, but another part of that is he has tendonitis, and like people don't know, tendonitis is not a fun time. And I think that that's really impacted him. Is, last year he was among some of the fastest speed bursts in the league with that NHL edge, and consistently one of the speedier players. And this year near kind of in the bottom third. And you don't just forget how to skate at 26 years old. So I think he needs to get healthy to get rolling. I think he needs to clear space in that room too. But if they do trade Elias Pettersson, because it'll be a lot easier to recoup value, we know basically what Mikko Rantanen was traded for. That offer was very similar to Vancouver with a little bit more. A player who's under contract, plays the middle of the ice, it makes sense. But so they can get someone like Martin Nakash and probably a first-round pick and a good prospect, and then another roster player for Pettersson. So if they decide to do that, I then think JT Miller will be dealt at the draft or in the offseason, or they'll do everything they can to move him out as well. Now, if you move Pettersson and JT Miller, Brock Besser's gone. Like, I think he's either traded at the deadline or he walks in free agency. Those are really only the two options. What's Quinn Hughes thinking? What's he going to do, right? Why is he sticking around when he can go maybe play with his brothers in New Jersey or take a bag from a contender when his contract's up the year after that? So I think for management, they really have to decide, what are they going to do here? Is the goal is to keep Quinn at all costs? Well, that means they have to probably bite the bullet and just move JT. And then they'll probably have to move Besser too, but you hope you recoup some assets so you can flip into win now options too. But I think that's the hope. That's the plan. But, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And all these offers from Miller have been punches in the mouth. And so I think that it's still a possibility that Pettersson is moved. It's been pretty quiet from my sources anyways. I know Rick Dollywall earlier brought up Colorado. It's a name that I've heard linked to Miller for a long time now too, that they're definitely interested in JT. And the Rangers, I think Dallas is out, that they're not super interested in them. They're looking for guys on expiring deals. So, if they want a center, they're probably looking at Brock Nelson or something like that. Yanni Gord. So yeah, that's probably what's going on in Vancouver anyways.
Yeah. Wow. And I mean, just to think about the amount of optimism that you can have going into a season, feeling like, hey, things might be okay. We might be good. And then, we've got one of the best defensemen in the world on our team. We've got, such promise, and boom, it's all blown up, and really through a lot of different things. And that, you also brought up a great point. Hey guys, if you hear it in the media, if you've heard it in the media, guess where it's already widely circulated? Throughout every NHL circle. There is no gossip circle like the pro scouts, the amateur scouts, the executives themselves. Everybody talks. Everybody knows. Nothing is being media driven so much as it is being shared publicly. And some people are okay with that, and some people aren't. But this is the way that it goes. But that the Vancouver situation is interesting. But then there was a little bit of chatter and buzz when the Los Angeles Kings healthy scratched Brandt Clarke. And now Brandt Clarke has had a really strong season. I think he's a really good development story for the Kings as well. They sent him to the AHL last year. He had a really strong year. They were able to bring him up, and he's been, especially in the absence of Drew Doughty, an important player for them and a productive player for them as well. He's had a couple of nice highlight reel plays this year. Things are going well, but he gets healthy scratch, and all of a sudden the trade rumors are going. And obviously we're always going to talk about players like him that are 21 years old, that are really still at the very early stages of their career. And there's still a ton more that they can potentially get to, and their ceiling to reach. And not only that, the Los Angeles Kings also have the history of having traded away Brock Faber in the Kevin Fiala trade. So now you're in a situation where we've got Brandt Clarke. It was one of those things where the alarm bells went off in my head a little bit. Jim Hiller says after the game, hey, young guys need time, they need rest, they need, it didn't feel quite right for me. And it does lead me to believe what is going on with the Los Angeles Kings. And I wonder your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, so I don't believe that, this is a player who's asked for a trade after being healthy scratched at this point. I think that he's fine. I don't think he was probably thrilled. But I mean, this is a guy who has been used to coaching staffs and teams not loving his entire game. He went 8th overall, right. But Team Canada snubbed him a couple of times, right? For the World Juniors there. And he everywhere he goes, he puts up a tremendous amount of points. He's excellent on the power play, so smart in transition. He can hit the stretch pass. He's got great handles. He's got a good release. With Drew Doughty out, all of a sudden offensive minutes opened up. He took advantage of them, and he was producing. And now Drew Doughty is back. Now, at the same time, do I have room for Brandt Clarke in my lineup if I'm running the LA Kings? Yeah, I do. I'm finding space for him still. Whether that's on the top power play or not, that's up for debate. And because he has cooled down as the season has worn on too. But if he is, I don't think he is, though. I don't think he is a trade piece for the Kings at this point. But if he is a trade piece, like you mentioned, moving out Brock Faber, Kevin Fiala was an 85-point player in Minnesota last year there. Now he's more like a 55, 60-point player in LA. And Brock Faber is going to be like a horse for the next 15 years. You move Brandt Clarke out to do something similar where you get some offensive help, a center, because Anze Kopitar isn't going to play forever, and Quinton Byfield really needs to take that next step if you want to be like, there's our number one center. So if you use Brandt Clarke to, maybe you dingle that out there for Elias Pettersson or something like that, or I'm sure the Canucks would love to give you JT Miller for him. Is that could come back to bite you? That could absolutely, maybe not in a Pettersson trade, but to go out there and go get a rental or to go get a player that maybe you can extend and you have for a little while longer, but maybe you won't thrive in LA's system as much. I think that's something that could come back to haunt the Kings for sure. But I'm sure there's a lot of teams that when they saw that, picked up the phone and gave old Robbie Blake a call and be like, hey, what's going on with Brandt there? We'll take him off your hands.
Yeah, I'd be fascinated to see kind of what the market looks like, what the return would look like. And you look at what Los Angeles has, and certainly Clarke is probably one of the most enticing pieces in their current system, a guy that could bring back value for you. So we'll see. And Clarke was a guy that it took me a while to come around on for all the same reasons that you mentioned, where, there were doubts about his defensive ability and different things like that. And I think he's skating. The skating that was probably one of the biggest ones,
right?
And,
yeah.
Looking at him, we were talking about him and Olin Zellweger, and then Zellweger kind of outplayed him in an under 18s, and really now since then the script has flipped a little bit on that one. So it's been interesting to watch Clarke's kind of circuitous route to where he is right now. But man, that's one where I'm just like, you're thinking about the future of your blue line. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, maybe could it all just be, what the Kings are saying, or is there a little more to it? We'll be intrigued nonetheless. I had one more question for you before we get out of here on the trade deadline, and that is, we've talked a lot about the 2025 NHL draft, and we've talked about the relative lack of depth and the lack of excitement necessarily about this class. And I wonder, what do you think in terms of, if you are a team that is looking for a rental, does it make you any more willing to part with a first? And is that even going to be enough in some of these cases, a 2025 first? Or do you think we might see some 2026 firsts go flying as opposed to the ones for this year, given that none of us are super pumped about the back half of the first round?
I have been told in no uncertain terms that teams that are selling are looking for 2026 first, and that teams that are trading players, that are selling some players that you normally wouldn't see maybe a first round pick attached to as a return, are going to be getting 2025 late first in return for those players. A player that you might think would be worth a second and a third, all of a sudden will get the 24th or 25th overall pick instead, just because of that perceived value of this draft. It is considered a weaker draft, especially once you get outside of that top 4, 5, 6. Then there's a gap, and then there's another gap, maybe around 12 or something like that. It's teams are absolutely looking for 2026. And then that comes with a whole, if you're trading future first, then there has to be conditions attached to them, because if everything falls off the rails, teams don't want to end up giving away a top 10 2026 for a rental or something like that, right? Which could cripple their franchise. So I think it's adding kind of a little more depth and intrigue to what the negotiations will be on the trade deadline. But no, I've heard from a number of teams that the ask from sellers is 2026. And the hesitation from buyers is to move 2026 picks.
Yeah, I get that too, because you just look and you're like, if you're thinking excitement of draft picks and getting first rounders, and some years getting a first rounder isn't that big of a deal, and I would say that this is one of those years where, based on what we've seen over the course of this season, how things have progressed, you can always get a player in that range. You can always find something that's going to work. But yeah, it's one of those things where I'm not sold on that being a high value proposition at this point. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, real quick, before we get to our final segment and our whole, you have to pick one. I just want to let everybody know, if you don't already, the AHL All-Star Classic is this upcoming weekend, starting on Sunday with the AHL Skills Competition. That will air on NHL Network and on TSN in Canada. So NHL Network in the US, TSN in Canada. However, you'll also be able to watch that across FloHockey social platforms for free. So you can get the skills competition, the Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and the All-Star Challenge all on FloHockey social channels. You can see us on YouTube. There are a number of high-end prospects that will be playing in this event. We have RJ Broadhead and Drew Remenda as the broadcasters for the event as well. So you'll get a top-quality broadcast with guys that have been doing it for a long time. And the AHL is one of the most fun All-Star weekends. Also, it's the only All-Star weekend this year. There's no NHL All-Star game. There wasn't an ECHL All-Star game. So it's all about the AHL All-Star Classic at Coachella Valley. FloHockey will be on the scene. We will be getting a ton of great footage for you guys. We will have a ton of content coming your way from that event. A lot of interviews with the top prospects that you're excited to see. Just rattling off some of the guys, high-end draft picks that are going to be at this event: Simon Nemec, Kevin Korchinski, Dalibor Dvorsky, Matt Savoy, Devin Levi, Isaac Rosine, Owen Beck, Logan Mayu, Scott Morrow, Sebastian Costa, Sam Colangelo, Elias Pettersson, Elias Salamonson, and that's just naming a few of them. There's a lot out there, a lot of great stars, and we will have all of that coverage for you. But that does now, Cam, bring me to our final question. And usually it's an either or, but today I'm going to fudge it a little bit. If you were to participate in an AHL All-Star or NHL All-Star skills competition, which would be the event you would be desperate to compete in?
Oh boy. So my kid's got a radar gun. He got it for Christmas last year. And so naturally, he's out there taking slap shots every day, trying to see how high he can get it. And then naturally I am also taking slap shots out there, seeing and I can still break 80, which makes me feel good, but I think I'd just be getting laughed out of the barn there if I was doing the hardest shot. So I'm taking breakaway relay because I think the handles, I think I could still get maybe a little backhand roof on one of these AHL tendies. I'm lying to myself here probably. But I'm going breakaway relay on that one because I think that'd be a lot of fun working with the boys and just coming in. Lack of pressure. I don't have to catch an edge going around a corner in the fastest skate or anything like that, or break my twig on a hardest shot and get 55 or something like that. So I'm going breakaway relay. How about you? Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Last year, the breakaway relay was one of the most entertaining events of the AHL All-Star Classic. At one point, Yaroslav Askarov lost his glove in the course of making a save and then made another save without his glove on. He put it behind his back, and I could only imagine seeing at the time he was with Nashville and is just saying, oh boy, somebody's going to be screaming if he tries to stop that puck with his bare hand. And Askey is he is definitely crazy enough to do such a thing, even in an all-star game. I also love the comment that he had the other day. Go ahead. Sorry.
Demko, I think Demko did that like mid-game. Might have even been the playoffs where he did it, and he's playing with the glove behind his back, the hand behind the back. That's crazy when that happens.
Yeah, it's like the old catchers rule there, and I also love this week. Askarov was asked about facing a penalty shot and what he says, and he says, "Oh no, whoa," and I was like, that's amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, he's a lot of fun. Hopefully, he is supposed to be at the All-Star weekend again. He's been with San Jose. They have not replaced him, so maybe, and I think the schedule actually might work out for him to come. So I hope we get to see him there again because he is an absolute showman. But to get to my event of choice, this has always been true. This has always been the one that I absolutely want to do, and it's accuracy shooting. I love the idea, and I'm not talking about like the new digitized version. I'm talking we got some foam targets, and those things are exploding on impact. That's what I want to do. I vividly remember watching the NHL skills competition when Ray Bourque went 4 for 4, and I was a huge Ray Bourque fan, and I was like, oh man, I would go in there and I would absolutely go 4 for 4. Brant Clark actually went 4 for 4 last year at the All-Star skills competition, and he celebrated as hard for that as I think he did any of his NHL goals so far. So I can relate to that because I think there's just something especially satisfying to seeing a target explode on impact of a great shot. So really enjoyable. I'm a big accuracy shooter guy. I feel like I can actually do it, which is the funny part. And although in front of a crowd, that's where maybe I don't. Maybe the AHL will let me try it. We'll see. I'm gonna be out there at Coachella Valley, and man, Coachella Valley in February. By the way, thank you very much, choice. AHL.
Good
we'll take
choice.
It. So
yeah, FloHockey, that's good.
Cam, before we get out of here, what's coming up on Elite Prospects? What should we be looking out for? I guess we got Four Nations coming right up, don't we?
We do. I'm mad that I didn't think accuracy shooting. You're right. Busting those foam markers there. That's elite. Very satisfying for sure. Yes, elite. At Elite Prospects, we've got a whole bunch of stuff coming up. I got my big trade bait big board coming out probably later today here on Thursday, maybe Friday morning. We've got Calder Power Rankings, which cues up really nicely with what we've been talking about here. We've got our big U23 organizational rankings coming out next month too, early next month. And then, Four Nations. It'll be pretty cool. I'll be on scene if the NHL ever gets around to credentialing everybody. I am talking to people. No one's got creds yet. I'm flying off in like a week here. So hopefully we get those creds sorted out. And so I'll be in Montreal and Boston. That'll be a lot of fun. I'll link up with good buddy Ryan Lambert there at EP, and we'll cover it in Boston. I'll be solo in Montreal, but I'll get some poutine. I'll get some karaoke with those French boys there, those RDS guys. So we'll have a good time for sure.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a lot of fun. And I basically already told you guys what I'm going to be up to. Going to the AHL All-Star game this weekend. We're going to have tons of great coverage on FloHockey. We've got our whole team going out there from the content side of things. So we will be talking to a lot of those top prospects. We'll be talking to the players. We'll also be showing you a behind-the-scenes look at what's going on. We will be everywhere at the All-Star Skills Competition. We will be getting you at ice level for the All-Star Challenge itself. So make sure you go to FloHockey social channels, and also make sure you are subscribed to this very podcast, Called Up the Prospects Podcast. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube, and you can get us on FloHockey or via the Flow Sports app and watch our smiling faces as we talk about hockey. But Cam, man, it's another fun episode. A lot of good topics, and we're gonna have a lot more coming up. A lot of things coming down the pike. NHL Trade Deadline, Four Nations. We'll certainly talk about lots more NHL draft talk and so much more. But Cam, thanks a lot, buddy. It's always fun to have you. I guess we'll see you next week. I mean, let's do this again. Same time, maybe even. I don't know. What, you good with that?
Same time, same place, same channel. Let's do it.
All right. Well, you, hopefully all of you listeners and viewers will also join us. Really whenever you want, because that's the beauty of a podcast, and you can do it anytime, anywhere. But thanks everybody for listening to this week's episode of Called Up the Prospects Podcast. My name is Chris Peters. For Cam Robinson, we'll see you next time.